Was it the Black Death that caused Europeans to appreciate life on Earth? Was it the shortage of people that made skilled workers more valuable, allowing them to make their own demands? Was it the explorations of unknown lands and scientific studies, showing that the world was not the center of the universe? Was it the ability of wealthy citizens to commission artists so they did not have to rely solely on the church to get paid for their work? Or was it what was it that spurred such a period of artistic revival and creativity during the Renaissance? Probably a combination of these factors and more. Whatever it was, we can be grateful to all the circumstances that produced some of the most talented artists and revered artworks of all time. Welcome to the Renaissance, everyone. The birth of the Renaissance. Think back to the first thing you learned in this course. Remember perspective? Remember how important it is to creating realistic paintings? Remember who we have to thank for modern systems of perspective? If you guessed the Renaissance masters, nice work. It's time to review the system of perspective and the artists who created and mastered it, and then take an in-depth look at the environment that cultivated the knowledge needed for such artistic styles. Before moving on to the influential Renaissance masters like Leonardo da Vinci, you'll first pay homage to the three artists who started it all. Before the Renaissance, there were many skilled artists who could have mastered perspective. But why didn't they? Since creating realistic art wasn't a primary goal before the Renaissance, artists didn't need to use perspective or create the illusion of depth. So why did the artists of the Renaissance embrace perspective? In a word, humanism. Humanists wanted to understand how things worked. They wanted to approach the world from a rational point of view. Rational means based on reason. So, humanists focused on the earthly world rather than on the popular medieval topics such as angels and the devils. Artists became well-rounded Renaissance men who studied not just the arts, but philosophy, math, and science as well. As a result of humanistic tendencies, there was an increased desire to portray realistic subjects and spaces in art. In order to achieve this heightened sense of reality, new techniques had to be developed, and techniques that were already being developed had to be mastered. Alberti and Brunelleschi, Renaissance men. Because the fields of mathematics, science, philosophy, and art were becoming so intertwined, many of the people who had an impact on the art world were not, in fact, artists. While neither of the men discussed next created great bodies of artistic work, one was primarily a mathematician and writer, the other an architect. They were both Renaissance men who studied and worked in many different fields, including the arts. They were both an important part of the artistic developments that characterized the Renaissance. Leon Battista Alberti was born in Florence in 1404. He would become a great Renaissance man and humanist with vast knowledge of a range of studies, especially math and the arts. Alberti changed the philosophy behind art making. His famous book on painting introduced the idea that art should study and imitate nature, and that in order to be a truly beautiful work, it must be done in perfect proportion and perspective. This concept became the driving force behind Renaissance artists' fixation on accurate painting the real world. Filippo Brunelleschi. Alberti dedicated his work on painting to a man he greatly admired and to whom he owed his ideas on geometric perspective. Filippo Brunelleschi. Brunelleschi was an architect and engineer who transitioned from medieval styles to the classical styles of the Renaissance. As an architect, Brunelleschi was constantly sketching and painting ideas. These experiments led to what most consider the first successful work of mathematically correct linear perspective. Brunelleschi's method for achieving accurate linear perspective involved drilling holes through wooden panels and looking through the holes at his subjects. You don't need to know the details of this process, just how that this mathematical approach to linear perspective allowed artists to achieve depth in the most realistic way possible. The contributions that Alberti Brunelleschi made connected philosophy, mathematics, science, art. These kinds of connections became the cornerstone of the Renaissance. Here's a quick review of the system of perspective that the Renaissance greats came up with. To create linear perspective, an artist first draws a horizon line. This helps ensure accurate perspective. It also divides viewers' vision. Once the horizon line is drawn, the artist arranges the perspectives around one or more vanishing points on this line. Then the artist creates a series of perspective lines that converge on the vanishing point. These serve as guidelines for how to arrange the rest of the painting. Using the ideas set forth by Filippo Brunelleschi and Leon Battista, Masaccio was one of the first people to use mathematical perspective in the art he created. Masaccio took the natural painting style pioneered by Giotto and combined it with the new techniques of his day. Masaccio was crucial in the development of humanist ideas. He would eventually be considered the first true Renaissance artist. While humanism marked a break from the traditional ways of depicting figures, especially religious ones, artists who worked in this style were still hired by the church. Starting with Masaccio, they began to portray Christian themes and scenes with an increased sense of realism. The realistic approach to traditional subject matter, using mathematical techniques, was founded by Masaccio and is called Renaissance naturalism. Renaissance naturalism was greatly influenced by a renewed interest in Greco-Roman and classical styles of art, but Masaccio did not always work in this style. His triptych at San Giovanni Viannale, completed in 1422, shows the influence of the international Gothic style in the graceful figures and in skewed perspectives of the throne. His Madonna and Child with 4 apples, painted only 4 years later, is a true Renaissance naturalist painting. It marks a definitive break with medieval tradition. Both works have the same theme and basically the same structure. So what made these two Madonna paintings so different? Look at the Virgin's chair in each painting. It is clear that Masaccio is attempting to create depth in both. To see the art in greater detail, click on the icon to the right. In which painting does he achieve a greater sense of depth? Click on the icon to the right to observe a painting by Masaccio called Trinity, painted around 1425. Then answer the questions below. Look at the painting and describe it in a few sentences. Masaccio's Trinity, about 1425 to 1428, is a fresco in the Santa Maria Novella Church in Florence. This is a prime example of linear perspective in his work. The careful use of perspective seems to carve a space in the wall on which it is hung, making it appear as though the room continues beyond the scene. This is called a trompe-l'oeil, or a trick of the eye. The eye is fooled into thinking that the painting is an extension of the room. Trinity depicts Jesus on the cross, a commonly painted subject, but it was an exercise in creating the illusion of space that no one had ever tried before. Masaccio also used foreshortening on his figures, another technique to create accurate perspective. Finally, the painting is ever so slightly created from a worm's eye view. That is, as someone standing below the painting would see its subjects. Because Masaccio understood perspective so well, he was able to create the illusion of space using all sorts of views. Although he is mostly known for his use of perspective, Masaccio was a talented artist who used many techniques to create lifelike, three-dimensional figures. Another way in which Masaccio mastered the art of depth was through the use of light. Masaccio's objects are lit by one consistent light source. He was able to mimic the sun's effects, which make his paintings look more realistic. Look at the panel look at the panel painting to the left. Notice that the shadows on each figure's face are on the right side. That means the light source is coming from the left, illuminating the features on the left while casting shadows to the right. To see the art in greater detail, click on the icon to the right. Masaccio's work is even more extraordinary for the fact that he painted using tempera and not oil paint. Unlike the new oil paints used by Flemish artists around the time, tempera make the details much harder to render because the paint dries so quickly. Masaccio's most renowned and studied works are in the Branacci Chapel frescoes, executed between 1425 and 1428. Among these, Tribute Money is considered his masterpiece. Tribute Money. There's a lot going on in Masaccio's Tribute Money. This painting is one of a series about the Apostle Peter's life. An apostle was a follower of Jesus Christ. This scene shows one of the miracles of Jesus in which he instructs Peter to go fishing and look in the mouth of the first fish he catches. Peter does so and finds a coin in the fish's mouth. This coin was to pay the temple tax or tribute, hence the painting's title. In this painting, the tax collector demands the tax from Jesus and his apostles in the center. Peter is seen on the far left looking in the fish's mouth, and again on the right paying the tax collector. Many people connect this scene with an important statement Jesus made in the Bible. He said, "Render unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's." Matthew 22:21, which is a passage from the Bible. The message is that although a Christian's highest authority is God, he or she should also submit to earthly authorities such as tax collectors. This painting, done in 3 separate scenes within the same frame, tells a story of Jesus and his apostles. His use of single-point perspective is precise, with perspective lines merging on Jesus' head, specifically created as the vanishing point. Each face is uniquely and carefully modeled to show bone structure, a difficult feat using tempera paint. In keeping with the era's renewed fascination with the classical world, Masaccio painted everyone in simple Greek and Roman dress, except for the tax collector, who was dressed like a Florentine gentleman. As in his 1426 Madonna and Child, Masaccio uses light from a single source to make the figures appear fully three-dimensional. The folds of the drapery are carefully shaded to illustrate this consistency in light source. There's an important feature that distinguishes the Branacci Chapel frescoes by Masaccio from the works of his contemporaries, such as the Merode altarpiece painted in 1425 by Robert Chapin. Click on the link to the right to compare Tribute Money to the Merode altarpiece. Another remarkable fresco is the Branacci Chapel frescoes is the Expulsion from the Garden, the first monumental depiction of nudes since ancient times. Masaccio's Adam and Eve are less detailed than those in Jan van Eyck's Ghent altarpiece, which was done in oil paint a few years earlier. What other differences do you see between these two great works? During the half-century after Masaccio died, other Florentine artists practiced and preferred the Renaissance naturalism techniques he had pioneered. Choose all the elements from the Branacci Temple frescoes that make Masaccio the first true Renaissance painter. Before moving on, review what you have learned in this study. Go over the notes you wrote on the study sheet. Ask your teacher any questions you might have. If you have not filled out your study sheet, do it now before moving on to the next activity. Study sheets are a very useful part to help you study for quizzes and tests. What did you learn? A new interest in humanism prompted the exploration of people's ability to act as rational beings. Artists sought to be well-rounded Renaissance men, exploring literature, science, and mathematics in addition to art. There was an emphasis on realistic depictions of people and places. Leon Battista Alberti introduced the idea that in order for art to be truly beautiful, it must be done in perfect proportion. He said that art should study and imitate life. Architect and engineer Filippo Brunelleschi developed a method for achieving mathematically correct linear perspective. Masaccio was the first artist to use the techniques developed by Brunelleschi to portray three-dimensional spaces using linear perspective. The Branacci Chapel frescoes are an example of Renaissance naturalism, a style pioneered by Masaccio. Take this opportunity to check your work.